Okay, it's 5 o'clock. It looks like we have someone on for the session, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Be Prepared Davenport Flood Risk Education Series. Tonight's session is going to cover flood insurance rate maps, also known as FIRM maps, how to read them, and what's new. Our presenters tonight will be Laura Berkeley, the Development and Planning Administrator with our Neighborhood Services Division at Public Works. She's also a certified floodplain manager. We also have Megan Overton, Neighborhood Development Coordinator with Community and Economic Development. The session tonight is being recorded for later viewing through our website. Be sure to use the chat function if you have any questions, and we will address all questions at the end of the presentation.
Okay, so this is Laura. I wanted to start with just a general explanation of what is a FIRM. So FIRM stands for Flood Insurance Rate Maps. They are FEMA-produced maps that identify areas that have a greater risk to flooding. This does not mean the areas that aren't mapped will not flood, only that the mapped areas have a known risk to flooding. So just some key terminology too, so that we kind of refer to certain things. I want to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. Special Flood Hazard Areas, SFHA. That is if you look on the map over here, it's the blue area. It is the 1% annual chance flood event, and that is often called the 100-year flood. And then the other piece of information you might hear us say is base flood elevation. That is how high the water will get in a flood event for that 1% annual chance flood or 100-year flood.
Okay, this is Megan. Now that Laura's explained what a flood map is, where can you find one? Floodplain maps are found on FEMA's Map Service Center. This is a free and public resource. When you go to the Map Service Center, this screen comes up and you get started by typing in your address. On the next slide, we'll show you a sample map and go over some features of it. So once you put in your address on the floodplain map or FIRMet, this will display. This is your official floodplain map. Floodplain maps are done by FEMA. They're not done by the city of Davenport. We adopt FEMA's maps. So shown here is the example of the FIRMet. On your map, you're going to find a lot of information. So the first thing we'll go over are the flood zones. As Laura started talking about, the teal represents the Special Flood Hazard Area, or 1% annual chance, also known as the 100-year floodplain. It's also marked as an AE zone. The orange represents the unregulated 0.2% annual chance or 500-year floodplain, also marked as X zones. Then we have the hash teal in orange represents the floodway. As shown on this map, it's mainly in the Mississippi River. However, it's not always confined to a body of water. It's an area that we do not allow development in. So any area that's without a color is considered outside of the floodplain and marked as an X zone. It does not mean that area is free from flooding, but it's generally considered outside of the floodplain. Then we have the location pin. This shows the approximate location of the address that you put in. Then we have approximate elevations. There are solid and squiggly lines that show you the approximate elevation. Laura will discuss this in more detail coming up. And then one thing to mention here is official elevations for your property must be obtained by a land surveyor. You cannot take what is marked on the map as your official elevation. And then finally, we have the effective date. This is the date the maps became effective for your county. Scott County's maps are currently effective February 18th of 2011. However, we are getting new official maps later this month, and Laura will go over more details about those. If you'd like help with this website or the maps, you can always contact any of the floodplain staff for assistance. So now we're going to turn it back over to Laura for a demonstration on the Map Service Center.
Okay, so this is site, the Map Service Center. You can, the links up here, you can Google FEMA Flood Map Center. You can come to Be Prepared Davenport, Iowa. We have a link there as well. So what you do is you just go in and you type your address. And hit search. And depending on your internet speed, this may take a minute or two, just so you are aware. And as you see, the information that Megan went over was displayed. If you want to create a PDF of it for your records, you can absolutely do that. How you do that is you go to Dynamic Map, it says Print Map or Format, and you click on that button. And it will think for a minute and pop up with the exact same thing that Megan showed you previously. There you go. So then you can download that and keep for your files, or you can print it so you can have a hard copy. Okay. A little bit more information for you. On the left side here, you can see that we had our previously mapped location with star. If you look at this other purple area, that is the closest base flood elevation that is shown on the firm. So that is an official base flood elevation. So you can see in relationship to where that is. That number is the 1% annual chance flood, how high the water will get at the 1% annual chance. That number is the 564.2. Over here on the right, for context, because what does that number really mean, right? So what you do in some instances is you compare this number to what the elevation of the ground is, and the difference between the two is how much above or below that base flood elevation that land is or your property is. On the right here, we have within the blue areas there are different probabilities of flooding happening. So it only shows up as a 1%. But in that area, some areas will flood more than others. So you can have a 10-year event, a 25-year event, 50-year. You can also have greater than that. As Megan mentioned, this orangey color, that would be the mapped 200, 500 years. So to put that in context for some people that know, river stage at the Locken Dam, it's a live, it's recorded live, so you can always go and check it. And you can see based off of river stages what kind of flood event we're having. So as you can see, the 100 or 1% annual chance flood is a 23.6. Just for context, the 2019 flood of record was stage 22.7 at Locken Dam 15. So it's close to, but not quite, the 100-year flood. There is also a great resource on the Iowa Flood Center that you can use that shows annual chances in more detail. It's available for the Mississippi River and some areas on the creek. We'll have that link available to you on bepreparediowa.com. So here's kind of some of that information that's available from the Iowa Flood Center. On the left here, you have what we call a depth grid. So I clicked the box for the 1% annual chance flood at the subject property that we selected. As you can see, there's some different colors there. You have a light yellow, and that, when you look at the legend, is between 0 and half a foot of water that would be there during a 1% annual chance or 100-year flood. And then it increases. The darker yellow is between a half foot and a foot, and then so on. on the right here is the annual chance gradient. So it shows you in different colors what annual probability that area has. So the red color down in the corner here is actually the Mississippi River that has a greater than 50% annual chance of flooding, obviously. And then you have green here that looks like a 2% annual probability, and then you have some 1%, and you go all the way up to 0.2%, which the 2.2% again is the 500-year. So a couple things to note. This information does not take into account what's happening underground. So you might end up with some sewer backup or some basement seepage depending on how wet the ground is. So that is not taken into account when you're looking at firms. Also, we are absolutely happy to assist property owners in interpreting this information. We understand that it's a little complicated and we can help walk that through you. We might also have a little bit more information for you. Also, these maps do not show letter of map amendments, which are LOMAs, and Megan's going to talk a little bit more about what that letter of map amendment is.
Okay, so what happens when your property is mapped in the floodplain and you feel that it shouldn't be? There are occasions when there are inaccuracies on the flood maps due to the scale of the maps. The process you go through is called a letter of map amendment, or a LOMA. This does require you to prove to FEMA that your property is actually out, and a survey of your property for elevation by a licensed land surveyor is part of that process. If your property is found to be out of the floodplain by a survey, then you will submit a review to FEMA. It is FEMA's decision of whether or not the property is approved for removal. The entire property might not be removed. It might just be part of the property, such as the structure. It just depends on the topography of your property. Once your structure is approved to be out, you will be able to request lower flood insurance rates or not have to have insurance at all on your property. We do always recommend flood insurance for all properties. So one thing to note is that if you have a LOMA, it will not be reflected on the official floodplain maps that we showed you earlier, but it is documented with FEMA. And then if you'd like more information about LOMAs, you can always contact Laura or myself, and we can get you pointed in the right direction. We can also check our records to see if we have a LOMA for your property on file.
So as Megan had mentioned, we are expecting new flood insurance rate maps that will go in effect on March 23rd, 2021. So when you go back to the Map Service Center on or after that date, you will see the updated map. So it will be fully interactive at that time. For Davenport, there are not significant changes. What they did is made the information more accurate to elevation information. So well, I'll show you a sneak peek between the current firm and the one that will be effective on March 23rd. So as you can see, there's a little bit more areas that have either been put into the 0.2 annual chance or been removed from the floodplain based off of the more accurate flood elevation information. So that's the level of detail that is shown. So some areas that were in might not be anymore, or there's possibility that some areas could be added in along the edges as well.
That'll wrap up the information portion of the presentation tonight. Our next session is going to be focused on low entry point elevation. We will have that session 2 times, one at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, March 16th, and one at 5 p.m. on Thursday, March 18th. For low entry point elevation, some of you may have received a postcard in the mail. The Silver Jacket study, part of our long-term floodplain study that the city is doing, surveyed some of the properties, and if you received that postcard, your property was surveyed for low entry points for that study, and you will be able to get more details on what that means in the low entry point elevation sessions. The last sessions will be focused more on flood insurance, why it's important, how to lower premiums, and then how city participation in the CRS program helps to keep those rates down. Those sessions will be at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, March 30th, and 5 p.m. Thursday, April 1st. We do recommend that if you're not able to attend all of the sessions, that you would primarily want to focus on the flood insurance session and make that your priority. But I do want to emphasize that we are recording all of these sessions, and so you'll be able to find them and view them later at our website. We do want to thank you for joining us tonight. If you have any questions at this time, you can go ahead and enter them in the chat function. You can also email us if you have questions after the session at flood@davenportiowa.com, and we will get back to you from there with answers. So we can take any questions that you might have right now. Question from Christopher is, can we recap the websites that were referenced?
Sure. The first one we referenced is called the FEMA Map Service Center, and I can go back in my presentation so you can see the hyperlink to it. Oops, too far. Oh, you know what? Let me exit out. So, Map Service Center is it's just mfc.fema.gov/portal, and we can put that in the chat for you as well. The other one that I referenced, if you want to look at the sneak peek of the new flood insurance rate maps before they go into effect, they're hosted by the Iowa Flood Center, and that is at ifs.iowafloodcenter.org /ifis/maps/hazard /. And then you can look at really any of the counties that have had these maps made for them. We can get that linked to you as well. And then the final one is also hosted by the Iowa Flood Center. It's ifis.iowafloodcenter.org /ifis/new-maps/risk/map. So it really, if you go to Google and you say Iowa Flood Center risk map, it will take you to this one, and that will get you both the risk gradient and the flood depth. They're both on there. If you Google Map Service Center, it will take you to the official FEMA maps that are in effect. And then if you Google Iowa Flood Center hazard maps, that will take you to the maps that will be going into effect on March 23rd. And we can absolutely get you those links individually too, if you would like.
Okay, Laura, if you want to go ahead and paste those into the chat function from your screen, and then we'll give a couple more minutes here if anyone has any further questions while Laura puts those in there for you.
And I see that there's another question, Nevada.
So the question is, are we able to talk about the flood ratings around creeks like Black Hawk Creek near Rockingham? They seem to be quite high areas compared to the Mississippi flood area, but have AE rates, for example.
That is going to be a great one for the flood insurance session, but what I can say is that there are, so AE is the flood zone. So that would be, there's different types of rates within that. You have what's called pre-firm rates and you have post-firm rates. And the pre-firm rates are lower because it's not, the risk wasn't known at the time. So keep that in mind. There are ways to reduce your risks, and we have a really great partner that will be talking a lot about flood insurance at that last series session. I hope that helps a little bit. So it's kind of like a sneak peek into that flood insurance one, and he does a really great job.
Thanks, Laura.
I can also, it depends on, I can kind of go to the sneak peek down on Rockingham on the Black Hawk, and I can show you what you're looking at, because I do know that there have been some favorable changes in that area. So let me do that, and I can just, so you can see the difference. I think that you'll hopefully be pleased. It's I think more accurate. So the map I'm showing right now is the effective map. So this is the February 18th, 2011 map. You can see the blue once again is the 1% annual chance. When you go to the new maps, they do take some additional areas out along Black Hawk Creek. That in particular is a beneficial change between the two. So once again, there is the new one, and then there is, oh, sorry, this is the old one, and then this is the new one. Any more questions we can answer for you? Okay.
We have one more. Is there a source of data on historical flood damage that is publicly accessible?
So that's a tricky question. So flood insurance information, which is one of the records of what flood damage has occurred, is highly confidential. So we do have that information in-house, but we are not able to share details on it with the general public. What you can do, if you want information about a specific property, is ask your insurance agent. You have to own the property. You need to have control of the property, but you can ask your insurance agent for the history of that property. You can ask if you're looking at a sale, you can ask. They might not be cooperative. They might not let you do that. All we would be able to tell you is if we have known history of flooding. That's all we're allowed to tell people, and that's FEMA's rule. So we unfortunately are limited in what information we're able to share to protect property ownership information.
Okay, so to view this recording later, you can find it at our website for our flood, for the city of Davenport, which is www.beprepareddavenport.com. You'll be able to find not only these recordings for the education series, but also different information such as current river stage. You can sign up for flood alert notifications. You'll be able to see the inundation maps, different flood information like that. So definitely check it out to see more. And we hope we see you at our next session on Tuesday, March 16th at 2 p.m.
Thanks all.